Hello, hello. Welcome to this week's episode of Not D&D, brought to you by EM World. In November, we are looking at games where you get to play different types of animals, and we couldn't discuss that without having Root in the discussion. So we have Brendan Conway here to talk to us about that. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, you are one of the co-owners of Magpie Games, and so Root is one of many games that you do. So I'd love to talk to you a little bit about your background and history in games before we talk about the Root role-playing game. So you've been playing games for quite a while, it's fair to say. Do you remember your first experience of role-playing games? What sort of games you played very early on?
Oh, for sure. There was a local comic book store in northern New Jersey called Time Warp Comics and Games. And I think after a couple of exploratory meetings there where my parents made sure that they were okay with it, at some point they would kind of drop us off because they would run a big D&D game on Saturdays, and it would be a whole bunch of kids playing together. So it was like 12 players, and it was D&D, but it was D&D. It was
Sure.
the specific blend of mechanics and homebrew that the GM wanted to do. And so I was playing in a massive group of kids. There was no character development at all. And it more or less was, let's fart around the town until a gigantic fight ensued, and we would all mostly die every time. It was glorious.
Amazing. It's fair to say, a lot of people play Dungeons and Dragons or some variation of, but it's fair from seeing your game design that you have quite a varied tabletop RPG diet. So when did you start exploring other systems and looking at the wider gaming space?
I think back then I was poking at some of the stuff that was available. I had a minor little stint with Rift, and I had more time with Vampire the Masquerade, though, of course, all of this is through the lens of a kid who's learning it by learning it from another kid who learned it from another kid.
Sure.
And so none of it's actually directly from the book, and therefore it always takes on that weird down the telephone chain tenor. But by the time I was in college and I was running a bunch of games for friends, that was the point at which I was like, well, what do these people want to play? And what is the game that's actually going to let us get there, or that's going to do things for us? So, we were playing I think that was the Firefly role-playing game. No, that was the Serenity role-playing game.
Oh, yeah.
I should know that because I worked on the Firefly role-playing game. But it's the mix of the two. We played the Serenity role-playing game. We played a Monty Cook's World of Darkness for a while. And that's when I started going online and looking at, well, what is the best role-playing game? And seeing stuff like Spirit of the Century and Fate, and started exploring those avenues.
Fantastic. And obviously you have a career in making games now. So from being a child who was very enthusiastic about playing games, now as an adult, you're creating them and putting them out there in the world. It's been over a decade of Magpie Games. But how did you get started in the games industry?
It was very much the fan sort of responsive. I just started making things and putting them out there, putting them in front of people, only with an eye towards putting them in front of people, seeing what they thought, seeing if I could do stuff with them and if anybody else could do anything with these things. I think one of the biggest moments was I wrote a gigantic description for an item I called the Angel Bone Blade. I wrote it for Dungeon World.
Okay.
And I just shared it on the very much now defunct Google+. But I got a very positive response. People were like, this is really cool, and this is great. And that's part of how I started to connect with Mark Diaz Truman and Marissa Kelly, who saw that write up and they thought it was pretty cool. And so we started talking a bit more about things that we could actually do with that and build upon that. That item would serve as the core of the very first book that I fully wrote, which was The Last Days of Anglekite.
Amazing. And would you have any advice for people that are looking to get into game designing and publishing RPGs?
Yeah, I think that it's a lot of the classics, but they really are just true and core to what it means. You've got to play a lot. You've got to think and design and try things a lot. If you can, you need to be play testing your stuff as much as possible, because getting that experience of seeing it in play, seeing how people react to it, and making modifications is crucial to building up that sort of skill set. It can be tough because a lot of groups are like, I don't actually want you to change the rules on me every 5 seconds. But one of the reasons why, for me, Masks: A New Generation was one of my first real full game designs and it came out as well as it did was because I played in an ongoing game with a great group of players who really let me do this. And I restarted that campaign multiple times to be able to say, like, that entire thing didn't work. We're going to try a whole new form of mechanic here to try to get us to the experience I want to have. And they were down for it. Bless them. And in the end, that makes all the difference. So it's play widely, read widely, do your best to get your designs play tested, and fix them fast. Like, make changes, don't cling to your darlings. And eventually it becomes important to get it in front of the people who might be able to help you publish it. But of course, today there's so many means to self-publishing as well.
Yeah.
That's sort of the next step after just that first, building up your chops and just doing the thing a bunch, just putting your ideas in front of people and letting them kick them.
I love that advice. That's really great advice. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Well, leading into that, so all that wisdom and knowledge went into creating Root. So let's talk about Root, the role-playing game. So if somebody's not heard of it before, this is obviously was first a board game, and this is the role-playing game for that board game. But if somebody's heard of neither, how would you introduce the role-playing game to them?
I think of the elevator pitch of the smash two things together, like woodland animals in Game of Thrones. It's kind of where I would go. It's an adventure game. You play these adventurers moving around this woodland setting. You are cute animals, but the setting you're in is in the middle of a big war with lots of different factions. You're not tied to anybody, and you have the chance to tip the war in any given direction. But it's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging. There are going to be a lot of different conflicts you're going to have along the way to get wherever you might be going.
Fantastic. And I mean, usually in these interviews, I ask people about what the inspiration for the role-playing game is, but obviously in this, there's the board game that exists, and there's a world and a universe there. For fans of the board game, how they'll understand, how that works. But how did you translate a board game to a role-playing game? Because whilst both games, they're very different experiences, and you need to edit and change a lot of factors, I'd imagine. So what was your process for paying homage to the board game, but making it work, for a storytelling role-playing game?
Yeah, so we first broke down the board game and we sort of said, where could we set this group of characters? We think about the holding environment, that's the term that we use internally to sort of say, what is the scope of the game, such that we know what the group of characters are and how they fit together, but also we know the boundaries of the setting. Here, at some level, we would say, if you decide to exit the woodland, we're just not focused on that. If you leave this entire large area, it's theoretically possible, but that's not the place where we're going to put our emphasis on in the game. But also our holding environment turned into this group of vagabonds, this group of renegades and people living on the fringes, the people who are completely comfortable going into the forests and the dangerous spaces of this entire setting, because that was a key piece from the board game that we managed to quickly glom onto. The Vagabond is already like the PC from a D&D game running around in the middle of a giant game of Risk almost. So it was a good starting point, but then fully breaking that down and being like, the thing that makes you special is that you are willing to go into the places nobody else will go. None of the other factions can go into the forests in the board game. So we just built upon that. And then we had the idea of, in the board game, you play one renegade. So what if we said the thing that makes you especially important is that you're a whole group of these vagabonds. You're a whole bunch, and therefore able to affect that much more change if you choose. And then by centering it there on that group of vagabonds, we could say, well, the vagabonds have a reputation track in the board game. You can have different reputations with the different factions, different relationships with the different factions. And we can also say, just to solve this holding environment question, if you're part of the group, that's where we're focused on. If you decide to leave and become that single wandering solitary vagabond, that's great, but you're not really part of our focus anymore. If you decide to join one of these factions and lead them to victory, that's great, but you're not really one of our focal points anymore. It solved a lot of questions about exactly where to focus the game.
Fantastic. And so what sort of stories are we telling when we sit down to play a game? Like, what would a session look like generally?
Yeah, so it changes over the course of the campaign, and I grin because I have very fond memories of the first sessions and these one-shots that often line up very similarly, of this group of vagabonds gets into a lot of trouble, winds up knocking down buildings and setting fires, and then they run away. It's very, I want to say it's almost like Antics. It has a bit more of an edge, but it's like they are very good at what they do, but that also means they tend to get into dangerous situations, and all it takes is one or two die rolls to go away from you, and then suddenly terrible things are happening, and you've got to deal with the consequences of your prior actions. And that's the actual main cycle of play over the course of a longer term campaign. That first session is action and excitement, and again, we chop down the tree, we set fire to the building. And then the next session, though, we're still in town, so we have to deal with the consequences of what we did. Or we ran away from town, we go to the next town over, but eventually word of what we did in the prior town will come back and haunt us. It's that sense that we can do all of these things, but the world remembers us and consequences will follow us, both good and bad. As we help people, they'll come back and circle back and return the favor or build our reputations, make sure people have heard of us. If we wind up setting fires every single place we go, well, gosh, soon enough, we're not going to be wanted. So that's the cycle we wanted, is that like you start off just as these competent, almost troublemakers and rogues doing what you want. But by definition, as you do things, you create ripples in the world, and those will always come back to you.
Fantastic. I mean, that gives me a really clear idea as a player, kind of what I'm going to be doing. So that's fantastic. But sat on the other side of the table. So if I'm wanting to run a game, what sort of guidance or support does the book give me to setting up and running campaigns in this way, so it gives players that experience you just talked about?
Yeah, we have a whole GM chapter, we have a Woodland creation chapter, and it's kind of that combination of things that add up to the experience. The GM chapter helps, in classic Powered by the Apocalypse sort of GM chapter way, gives you agendas and principles and moves and guidance on sort of moment-to-moment running of the game, as well as overall ideas you should keep in mind. But with the Woodland creation chapter, that's where you will build your own particular version of the Woodland. You can use the board game map if you want. We have rules for that. We have a couple of pre-made maps, but you'll always customize it, and the clearings will have their own names and their own communities and their own problems. And we provide a lot of tools so you can build out what the problems of this community are, what people are likely to encounter, and then all of that then ties together with things like the reputation system that guarantee as we do things here, some of it will stick to us and go on. And the GMs are simply just reminded, cool, create problems that don't have easy or simple solutions that the Vagabonds will have to either engage with or choose to flee from and go somewhere else, which will have its own consequences. And then just always remind them of what has happened in the past, and not in this punitive, how dare you, I'm going to punish you for having done these things, but in this like, you deposed the bad guy from the last place. That's great. That actually means that clearing is now free and it's governing itself. And that means every other faction hates it. And actually what you're seeing is armies converging on this place that you freed. So guys, what are you going to do? Are you going to head back there and try and defend this place that you freed? It needs your help. You don't have to, though. You guys could go and do your own thing. You are just vagabonds, after all. That's the kind of thing that the game guides GMs to do over and over again.
So you briefly mentioned that the game is powered by the Apocalypse. I was wondering why you chose that as the system for the role-playing game, and why you thought that would be the best fit.
Yeah, so we have worked a lot with a Powered by the Apocalypse framework. That's where most of our games have been settled, and we're very familiar with it. We know a lot of its core principles and ideas. We also kind of feel like every single time we do one of these games, we are designing a bespoke version of it, a new system for that particular game. And so one of the first things we will always ask is, can we do that? Does it actually fit? Does it do the kind of thing that we need it to do? Our experience after doing all of these games, that Powered by the Apocalypse works really well for games that kind of have a chaos snowball effect, where one thing leads to another, and the action doesn't really have to settle down or slow down. It's not so much, in our experience, for longer term things where we're doing ongoing projects that this character could be building for months, or creating the sword, and it's going to take years of their life to finish the sword. It's more for, we do the thing and it causes the tree to fall over, and the tree causes the building to collapse, and oh my god, that started the fire, what do we do now? And as we run away, oh my god, the guards are coming after us, what do we do now? That sort of thing after thing after thing after thing. And thinking about what the Vagabonds experience was going to be like, and how they are these rogues and they get into these situations, that seemed to fit very well to us. It seemed to make sense that we wanted the experience of these characters who are very competent getting into trouble, that trouble snowballing into an exciting set of adventures. And then at the end of the session or at a particular moment, the tension can release, and then we can set up a new situation and let things snowball from there.
Fantastic. And the Vagabonds themselves, we've mentioned these Vagabonds, the players that will be playing throughout the game. What does character creation look like? So what sort of choices are we making when we're creating our characters?
Yeah, so we have a playbook for every Vagabond from the board game, and the core book includes the original 9 Vagabonds, and then we added a bunch more into the second book, the Travelers and Outsiders book, and then we've added still more in our next book. And so there are so many different archetypes that you can choose. The idea of each of these archetypes, they can look a little bit like a class from D&D, but a playbook also just tells us what kind of story you are about, what kind of thing you're interested in, what kind of stuff you're good at, but also what kind of issues should come before you, what kind of concerns you should have. So we have a thief playbook that's a really good example, because it's easy to see and say like, thief. I know what a thief is. You do thiefy stuff. Sure. Yes, that's all entirely true. And we're giving you the tools to do thiefy stuff, and we're making you really good at stealing. But also there are things in the playbook that are going to guide what your story is about. One of those things might be that you actually are greedy. And we raise the question of, is your greed going to cause you trouble? What point do you stop being greedy? Do you make the choice to try to move away from that aspect of yourself? How much are you willing to sacrifice for your own greed? Those questions kind of get baked into that archetype, and each of them do that, aiming in a particular direction of a set of issues.
And do you have any particular favorite playbooks?
I think one of them I really like is the Champion, who is almost our version of a paladin, where you're supposed to be like, we had a playbook in the first set that was called the Arbiter, which is a fighter who's nice and tries to resolve conflicts. But the Champion then comes in as, I have picked, and this faction is the one that is right. They are the good guys, and I am going to serve and defend and push forward their purpose. And of course, it includes the possibility for the Champion to be like, wait, I was wrong.
Yeah.
That was not right. It's actually this faction. This faction is the one that's right. And so it manages to both be kind of cute and funny. And we have this adorable like pug in armor as the character picture for the Champion. But also it creates stories that are both really interesting and dramatic and tragic in a way, as this guy keeps trying to do right, picking the side they think is the best, and being foiled or being confronted with the complexity of situations that they may not have expected.
And most importantly, can I be any animal that I want to be in this game?
Generally, yes. Like the limit we would normally say for ourselves internally is it's got to be from the appropriate environment, sort of forests, so not jungles, not deserts, except, of course, that being said, we have the notion that there's a much wider world around this place, and there are lots of figures who come from other places, and as a result, they can be whatever. We have a brand new playbook that's all about being the sort of wanderer, having this interest in just seeing stuff and just exploring the world and seeing lots of places and never staying in one place. And I believe they are a lemur, represented as a lemur. So yes, you could probably play anything.
Fantastic. I mean, that's the most important thing when we're spending this month talking about, role-playing games where we can play different types of animals. So I had to ask the question.
Oh yeah, of course.
Also talking about the game, the characters have kind of specialized gear and weapon skills. So what sort of role do those sort of tools play in the game?
Yeah, we wanted to honor the fact that in a lot of these stories and a lot of these games, getting stuff feels good and it is valuable. We wanted to make that actually true. You are these vagabonds who, especially early in the game, likely care about money and gear. And so we wanted that to matter. So we spent a bunch of time thinking about how to actually do that, especially because in the board game, you get gear from factions. It's one of the key mechanics. They build it and then they can sell it to you basically in certain ways. And as you get more as the Vagabond player, you become more and more potent in that game. So we really wanted to put the focus on there. Our decision was basically to say, you can have this depletion stat that tracks all of the random stuff you'd carry on you at any given time. And you can mark that off to more or less say you're emptying your pockets for some crucial minor thing that you need in the moment. But the gear, the actual real pieces of equipment that we want to pay attention to that matter, your sword, your shield, the thing that is yours, those come in with special traits. They give them additional abilities, special tags that let them do certain things for you, and they come in with wear, so we know as they get degraded, you'll eventually have to either get them repaired or replace them entirely. That creates sort of a cycle that actually pushes a lot of Vagabonds to act before they really know for sure which faction they want to side with or which clearing they care about. Because simplistically, you do stuff, your gear degrades, you need to get the money to fix it, so you do more stuff, which causes your gear to degrade, so you need to get more money to fix it. And all of that, though, will then create the ripples in the pond that we need to get you to start paying attention to other things as well.
Fantastic. And I imagine a great tool for the GM as well to keep the story moving and getting good flow in the game, like you mentioned. So yeah, makes perfect sense.
Part of what we learned with the snowball of these disastrous consequences, sometimes in a PBTA game, it can be a sensation of overwhelming downpour of an avalanche upon you. One of the advantages that the equipment actually gave us is stuff can keep happening and you can keep getting in trouble, but actually I as a GM can sort of soften the blow and let us move forward a little bit more quickly without it being too hard by just saying, yeah, your gear degrades. Eventually, that will absolutely have consequences that are fairly serious, and we'll have to come back to it. But for the moment, you're just checking off a box, going, "Ooh, okay," and then we move on. It allows the GMs to actually control the pacing and the tension much more finely.
And so the game's been out for a number of years now. Was it first launched 22, 23?
Yes, I believe that's when it came out.
Yeah, came out then, and since has won many ENnie awards, UK Games Expo awards. But beyond the core rulebooks, I believe there's expansions and other things you've got planned in the future. Could you talk us through what exists in the Root role-playing game universe?
For sure. So we started off. We had the notion of doing the core book and an expansion. They kind of sort of turned into companion pieces in that first stint, especially as the limits of working with actual paper and books that can only be of a particular size, knowing one of the things we really wanted to do was the super cool slipcase that could hold both books. It just translated to, we needed those books to be companion pieces that were done at the same time, that supplemented each other, and things that were less core but still valuable and important we could slide over into the expansion book. That first expansion is Travelers and Outsiders. And that includes a couple of the expansion factions from the board game, so you can introduce them into your game, like the Riverfolk Company and the Lizard Cult, I believe. And then we have recently revisited it with a campaign for a new book called Ruins and Expeditions. The idea of Ruins and Expeditions was to include still more of the new factions that they are releasing for the board game and make them playable in your tabletop game of Root, your role-playing game of Root. Those include the Lord of the Hundreds, which we're calling Hundreds as the faction. They're like a mob, a rebellious mob that isn't doing this to keep themselves free. They're kind of just burning and destroying things as they go. And then there is the Keepers in Iron, who are Badger Knights trying to retrieve, I say it with a smile because it's always just so fun, Badger Knights trying to retrieve the lost relics from ruins inside of the Woodland. And so both of those can now be introduced along with several new playbooks to add even more options and ideas. There's a playbook for playing essentially a little kid who idolizes another one of the Vagabonds, and they can really, really do amazing things when they are doing what they think the other Vagabond would do. But a lot of that is this question of, is that actually what the other Vagabond would do when you're the adult and you're like, oh my God, this kid thinks I would do that? No. And then Ruins and Expeditions also was adding Ruins and Expeditions. They were always a part of Root, but a lot of the core stuff was centered around almost the politics and the nature of the clearings and the problems you would encounter there, this focus on the war. Ruins and Expeditions as a book adds a lot more to how to go into these old ruins in the Woodland, how to find things, relics, encounter the dangers of those ruins like giant ants and just enormous creatures that are causing trouble for even the clearings nearby. So it adds an almost more, we can go and do a dungeon and fight a monster aspect to the game. It fleshes that out much more substantially, while also still existing in the overall framework of, but the war's going on and your reputation matters and what are the ripples that are going to come back to you eventually.
Fantastic. Well, sounds very exciting. And what are your kind of future things on the horizon? So for people that already know and love the game, what's coming next?
simplistically speaking, every time Leader Games, who produces the board game, every time Leader releases like a new set of factions for Root, the board game, we have that internal discussion of like, okay, what are we going to do with these? How are we going to make these come forward? How are we going to bring these to life? So they keep releasing really cool new factions. I believe, like, for instance, in their new expansion that's coming out, they have the Lily Pad Diaspora, which is like a frog faction that are trying to come home and spread across the woodland. And we're like, okay, how can we do the Lily Pad Diaspora in the role-playing game? And so every time they release stuff, it gives us more to play with for another expansion book. And then we also want to find our own angle. What's a place in the setting that we could expand? What's something else we can explore? We've done a lot of playbooks, but we can keep finding new ideas for a kind of character archetype people can play with. So it all sort of comes together, building off of Leader's own work. Like, it is ultimately, Root is the thing that they made, and we want to honor what they've done and build upon that. So every time they hand us the gift of a new expansion, that's when we kick into gear. So yes, that new Leader board game expansion is coming out not too far from now, which means we're already considering how to turn that into a role-playing game.
Well, that's exciting to see. Looking forward to seeing more for the board game and the role-playing game coming up soon. Thanks so much, Brendan, for coming on and talking to us about the role-playing game. Before you go, I would like to ask you if you have any recommendations for any other tabletop role-playing games.
I have many, and so I'm always in that mode of like, okay, do you want to hear all of them? Do you want to hear just the one? The one that has lately been obsessing me, that's been causing me to focus on it a lot and figure out how to play with it and get people to play with me. It's Memento Mori by, I believe, Two Little Mice.
Yes.
That game, so I am a gigantic From Software, Dark Souls, Elden Ring kind of fan, and there are a lot of games nowadays that are trying to capture that feel. I would, be lying if I said I had not myself been thinking, how would I do that? And for me, Memento Mori, despite not at all being in that exact setting or in that exact mode, captures it for a tabletop role-playing game in a way that I find amazing. It doesn't one-to-one replicate those games, which is what I think is necessary to really say something or push it forward, do something interesting and make it work, because you don't actually want to just do Elden Ring, but a role-playing game. For me, I'd want to see, like, but what does a tabletop role-playing game do differently or better than the video game? And Memento Mori does so many things that are just so interesting while still feeling like this thing that I can kind of recognize, that I'm enamored with it right now.
Fantastic. Well, Memento Mori is a great recommendation. We've had them on the podcast, so if you're listening and want to hear more about it, go into the archives. You'll see the episode on Memento Mori where you can hear from the creators their opinions on the game as well. Fab. Well, Brendan, thank you so much for coming on. It's great to have you, and really excited to learn more about Root and play some more of the games as new things come out.
It was my pleasure. Again, thank you so much for having me.
No problem. And thanks for everyone who's watched and listened. We'll be back next week with more anthropomorphic animals for tabletop role-playing games for you. Thanks very much, and bye.
Bye.